I'm Dan Lewerenz. I'm a member of the Iowa tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and I'm here with my grandfather, Pat Murphy, also a member of the Iowa tribe of Kansas, Nebraska. In our first stop on a trip through the reservation and spots near the reservation to kind of show some members of the family who haven't been up here what this place was and what places were significant for our family. We're right off of Nuthatch Road, which runs over here north and south. This is north up in that direction. And on the western end of the Iowa reservation, near the border with the Sac and Fox Reservation, and near the northern end of the Kansas border, but the reservation extends to both sides over to the Nebraska side. This is the area that the Murphy homes were in, right? The original home down the hill?
Well, yeah, where the older kids were born, right down at the bottom of that, just on the other side of those lower trees there. And then
When was that?
1925, 27. This house had already been built up here, and that's where the grandpa and those lived. We lived down there because we didn't have any place else to go. And then this rubble here, this is part of the barn that was right over in here. And then I think that's part of a windmill down there. And the well was right about where that trash is right there now. So then we walked down to the well and carried the water back up the hill in there.
And all of this was part of the original Murphy allotment then?
Yeah, I don't know how much more, but it went down here too.
Is that 160 acres for a head of household, or?
Well, most of the kids got allotments also, probably 40 acres, I don't know for sure, and how much of that was consolidated into here. But this is Grandma Murphy's, Mary Murphy's. This is her allotment here.
Mary Murphy was Leah's mother?
Yes.
Okay.
Anyway, and then after the Idols bought this probably 30 years ago, or 25. Then the idols come in and terraced all this. It was all just rough ground. That was all timber from here that way. It wasn't broken ground. There's a couple spots in there that were, and all of this south of us was pasture most of the time. They broke it for corn even back then.
What was the house like down there?
Oh, just an old fallen down house, like any old original farmstead.
And the house up here?
It was scrumptious in its day.
Now we're looking at the top of the hill where the newer house was. Tell me about that house, Grandpa.
Oh, it was like nothing else around here. They had gas lights throughout it, push button switches. Had not acetylene, but carbide gas is what they used. And right over in here was the tank was buried there, and they'd put the carbide in the top, and it dropped down into water in the big tank, and that formed carbide gas, and then that's what to come in and lit the house. They had it working a few times that I can remember, not very long, because the water tank leaked. They run out of water in there, it wouldn't make any gas.
And who was it lived up here?
Well, this is where Mary Murphy and Pete Murphy lived. And then all the kids and relatives came here to visit all the time. Got together up here. So, and there was probably down there pretty close to that tree or in there was a ice house. They'd cut ice off the river and bring it up and put it in there. It had sawdust insulation. It was down in the ground. So they had ice up here all summer when they were, when it was in its heyday. And there was a smokehouse hooked onto it. They smoked all their meat and stuff. There was corrals and for the livestock over in here. Had 2 horses, Dolly and Nellie, and that's what Laney and always talking about, Dawn taking her a ride on the horse. That was Nellie, I think it was. But she was old then.
So Mary Murphy was your grandmother.
Correct.
And your father was Leo.
Correct.
Who were all of his siblings?
Oh, I don't know them all. There was, Grandma was married to a Rouleau first, and they had 2 daughters, Grace, Patt. She married a Patt, and that's where I got my name. And the other one, I can't think of her name. Anyway, they were older, and there's a bunch of stories that I got about them. And then there was 2 older daughters with Pete, I think, and then Clarence Murphy, Pauline, Esteline, not necessarily in that order, and then Clarence and Brian, and then Dad, I think. I never did get the straight of who all those people were.
Was Leo the youngest?
Yeah, he's the youngest. He was the spoiled one. He's probably 10 years younger than Brian, the next one up.
And Leo married Mabel. She was from up in Rulo?
No. Probably when he met up with her, they were probably in Robinson over here. And she had gone to normal school, and I'm not even sure where. So she was teaching around here.
And who were all of their children, your siblings?
Oh, Mary Lee's the oldest, Don, Raymond, Ellsworth, me, and Elaine. Nobody remembers Don telling it, but from the schoolhouse over there, he had this pony, but the school marm was rooming with this idol over here, Harrison Idol, and he'd ride the horse, and take her over there on the weekends, and through the woods, if you can imagine, that was all woods out in there. And then Josie Vetter lived about a half mile over in the woods over here, and we cut across through the woods, go visit her with Pauline when I stayed here.
And was Josie Vetter kin to you guys, or was she just a family?
I know she was a family friend, but I don't know whether we were also, just about everybody up here is related someplace.
Mm-hmm.
So this was quite a place. A lot of the old hickory trees are still there that were along the lane.
And this house burned down then?
Yeah, the fire department come out and put the fire out first, and then overnight the wind came up and it just zapped it.
When was that?
Oh, 15 years ago. It was after the Idols had purchased it, but who knows how the fire started. There wasn't nobody living here. They'd pretty well modernized the whole house 10, 15 years before that. And that's after Pauline moved to town, and she sold the place, and I'm not even sure who she sold it to, so, but then, and I don't remember any of those farms ever being up there when we were around here. That's the state line road down here, and
just on the other side of this hill,
where the bridge turns down
Yeah.
here at the bottom of the hill. That's the state line road, and that's Sack and Fox on that side of this road.
Right.
Is the Sack and Fox Reservation.
So we're right at the corner, I guess, of the Kansas side of the reservation.
Right.
It continues to be the reservation north of the Nebraska line.
Yeah, Grandma, part of the allotment was in Nebraska, just across here. But they rerouted this is part of the Nemaha, I think. And then they rerouted it to help with flooding and things. And if I'm not too far wrong, that's probably Roy's Creek right down here.
That runs where these woods are here.
Yeah, right here on the other side of from the curve down there, it runs cattywampus that way and down on the draw that way.
Named for the French trader Roy, who settled out here and married into the tribe?
I suppose, yeah.
Anything else you want to tell us about this place?
Not on public. Not fit for mixed company.
Okay.
So, this right over in here was Margrave's. They had a store and all kind of things like that. Down here in the draw was the elevator, and it was one of the first ones around here. But it was it was rigged up with an elevator in there, so they could dump wagons into a pit just like they do today. Only they had to use horsepower, mule power, or something to lift them up. But it was just like a modern elevator. So and there's used to be right down there on the curve where the bridge is. Used to be graveyards or some graves just on the north side of it. Be Sack and Fox graves, and then the county put the new bridge in. They just dozed everything. They didn't bother to do anything with it. Just Indians and the Sack and Fox were up there with ground penetrating radar looking for it, and they couldn't find any signs of it. But I'm sure that it was close to the road. They just dozed them all up.
Here we are at the White Cloud Home Museum, which is not the original White Cloud house. It is a recreation, but it's on the site of the original White Cloud allotment, and it is typical of the construction of homes during the allotment era from roughly 1887 through the 1930s and 40s here on the reservation.
Well, it was typical for the chiefs, and he was the last chief to have a house built for him, and they were a little better than everybody else's house. And this is the one for, I think it was James White Cloud, and he was probably the last one that lived in it. And they had a museum in it at one time, but too much vandalism and things like that. And I don't know whether there is an inscription there or not.
You can see the picture they always use of White Cloud has that bear claw necklace, and you can see that also on the plaque that's on the little stone or brick plinth there. That bear claw necklace is a noted Iowa imagery.
It's in the casino up here. So, and the Campbell, well, the powwow grounds are right over on the other side here.
Right.
And across Roy's Creek is the Campbell Cemetery and the Campbell family. I don't think you can get to it. It's you have to cross the creek over there, and it's in a private field.
We are now at the Iowa Tribal Powwow Grounds. How long has this been the powwow grounds for the tribe?
Well, I think this is the original spot, the White Cloud Powwow. And then it kind of faded away. They quit having powwows down here, I think probably in the 70s or something like that. And Pete Fee came along in the 80s and kind of started it back up again. And then in the 90s, the tribe kind of took over the powwow and financed it, and they built the buildings here, and they put in the arbors and bought grandstands for it. And back in this area, they put their tents. I don't think anybody has a teepee in here anymore, but they put tents, different families, and also they can park their RVs down in here. There's electrical hookups, or there used to be, down in there, so they could have electricity for it. And then the tribe has just added more stuff in here all the time, and they keep it all mowed and everything. It used to be kind of a muddy place. The tribal people came down and used their own mowers to mow it for several years till the tribe took it over. And what I was talking about, I'm not real sure just exactly where it is, but the Campbell Cemetery is across over here, across the creek. That's Roy's Creek. It goes down through here.
Named for Baptiste Roy, who was a French trader and had a ferry along the Nemaha River.
Yeah.
Later married into the tribe.
I'm not even sure who he married into the tribe for. They, I think there's a kitchen, or there used to be a kitchen in here that they could do meals and things. When they visiting tribes that have their drums and their singers, they always fed them in the evening, and that's where the kitchen used to be, so I'm not real sure what's there.
The tribe has an annual powwow every year. Did they do that when you were young?
I don't know. That's where the old had the regular white cloud powwows in here, what I understand, but we never were around when they were doing powwows. They were quite the thing, I guess. A little more traditional. This is the Leary site. It was a village for many years, occupied by a good share of the Oneota people at one time. The Iowas were here probably last, but the Kaw used it. Well, like I said, most of the Oneotas, which are a good deal of the Siouan tribes, and it was pretty well robbed, or the artifacts, people were picking them up even into the 1960s, probably into the 70s. They would come out and pick up artifacts from here, and they're scattered all over the country now. But it was a pretty big historic site as far as people go.
If I remember right, it's historic for a couple of reasons. One is that this was a place to find pipestone, one of the maybe 4 big pipestone centers in the United States, or at least in this part of the country, and that's why there were people gathered here.
Well, I don't know about that. It stands to reason that this is where you find the pink granite rocks, and wherever you find those, there's pipestone there generally. So I don't know about that part of it. I hadn't run into that in the studies I was doing.
whatever brought people here, there were settlements here and certainly people passing through. And so there are grave sites and everything, and that's why NAGPRA is issue here.
Right. I've never done anything with this up here. It was all excavated a long time before I got involved with NAGPRA. But the site was right over in this, most of it. Although, like I said, it was a big settlement, so it moved all over here.
So here we're at the Franklin Cemetery, up on a hill near the Leary site. What's the significance of this cemetery, Grandpa?
There are people buried in it.
Well, that is the significance of most cemeteries, and I think that there are some Robidoux and some Brins that have sort of formal plots here.
Ours are Robidoux.
Robidoux.
Robidoux, yeah. Robidoux are in southern Iowa tribe, I think, plus a bunch of others. We call ours Robidoux. And this is also where we brought our remains from over east to the east end of the reservation that I had excavated, and we brought them over here and reburied them during one of the meetings here.
Those were located along a road over there.
They scraped them out, grading the road. The Iowa tribe did. And most of the gravestones and things are gone up here. There are still a few. And, well, there's a creek behind us.
Bit bigger than a creek.
Oh, is it? Okay.
You said that's the Nemaha River?
I think so. I think it's backed up from the Missouri. Yeah. They used to call this the Nemaha Agency.
Nemaha Agency oversaw Iowa, Sac and Fox, and Otoe, and Omaha, or not Omaha?
I suppose if there were any Omahas down here, they did. But that was the main, was the Iowas and the Otoes and Missouri. There could have been some Ho-Chunk, Winnebago down here in this agency also.
And north of our reservation was the old Nemaha half-breed tract, right?
Well, it was just a half-breed tract, but there were, I think, if I remember right, there were 6 or 7 different tribes that they didn't qualify for regular allotments, so they made a strip down through there and allotted that land to what they called half-breeds. That was, most of them were just short of being full-bloods that they allotted to, or anyway, the white guys had it bought up before they ever divided it up to the Indians, so they didn't get much, little money, and that was it. This is Reuben Kent's family over in here, I think.
Reuben Kent, a noted Iowa artist,
Right.
Pottery.
Ceramicist.
We're at the White Cloud Casino, which is the home of the tribal gaming operations. The casino is immediately behind us, and the bingo hall is over on the right. Now, did they always do bingo at this location, or when the tribe started bingo, did they do it somewhere else?
No, that was the original place that they started the bingo.
And then they expanded when they built the casino on.
Right. So they've always had when they could have it, they've had the bingo. So
The outside of the building is decorated with the clans of the Iowa. Behind us is the Bear Clan, and inside is the famous bear claw necklace that is one of the well-known images from the Iowa tribe. There's also pictures inside of a lot of Iowa famous people from the Iowa past, some of them chiefs, some of them other notable people, including multiple of the White Clouds, at least 2 or 3 of them. They have pictures in there. Some of the pictures are illustrations by, is it Carl Bodmer?
Yeah.
And there are a couple also in there by George Catlin.
The 7 clans. Snake. What's the other one next to it there?
This is a pigeon.
Yeah. That's,
and I may be 2 of them of the pigeon, because I don't. There's a thunder eagle, but I don't think that that's the thunder eagle on the stick over there. Around the other side, there's elk. Probably the thunder eagle over there. Beaver. So, what is the significance of the bear claw necklace?
Well, the bear represents power, and well, otherwise it was a chief's necklace. One of the White Clouds had it last, and went through the pawn shops and stuff, and one of the tribal members happened to see it it was on loan to the Smithsonian, and they happened to see it there and claimed it, but it was in the museum
in Indianapolis, right?
No, it was well, it was, could have been Indianapolis, but anyway, they reclaimed it, and the museum didn't hold them up on it, didn't keep them from getting it. So in 2000, let's see, was it 2000 or 2000? Long in the first part of the 2000s, they brought it back here, and anyway, they built that box for it, and they had it down in the tribal offices for years. So, anyway.
And the casino operation now funds a lot of the tribal government operations, right?
Yeah, that's actually that's where all the tribes that have casinos get most of their money for infrastructure, as far as roads and things. We're have to fund part of the roads just like any other government does that are on the reservation. So that's where we get our money.
I know a lot of people think that if you have a casino, it means the individual tribal members get money. How much money you get from the tribe this year?
Big goose egg.
How much last year?
It was a big goose egg.
Year before that?
Got $100 for being an old person.
Congratulations.
There you go.
All right.
So that is the way it goes. Some of the other tribes get money every year from their tribal gaming operations, but where it's so small, it takes a map to get here, and then it takes another map to get out. We're not very well situated for anything.
You broke out a $20 bill. How'd that come out?
Doubled it.
Good for you.
I should have been 100.
We're at the tribal headquarters, which houses the tribe's offices and administrative buildings, the community center, the meeting space for tribal meetings, and tribal health clinic. How long has this been kind of the center of tribal operations? When was this
Well, they started with the tribal offices themselves.
Over here.
On clear to the left. And that was probably in the early 70s, somewhere along in there, that they built it. And then next was the Ogden building, which is right behind. And it came probably 5-7 years after the offices. And then this parking lot was all gravel. They probably put it in the last 2 or 3 years, mid 20-teens. And then clear to your right is the offices for the Tribal Health Center. And next to it, that was built next after the Ogden building. And then the one right behind us is well, they call it the Wellness Center, but it was has all the exercise equipment and things in there like that. So I haven't even been in it.
That whirring noise we hear in the background is the wind turbine, right?
Right. I don't know what's keeping it running now.
Wind.
We bought 2 and we got 1, but we paid for both of them. And the other one's laying on the ground back there, I think. They might have hauled it off for scrap. Sometimes we're not too smart when we buy things. There it went. Better stand back a ways so we don't get hit by flying debris.
We're in the George Ogden Senior Community Center on the reservation. One of the things that happens here are the tribal meetings that take place twice a year, once in October and a mid-year meeting in May. And the building is decorated here on the inside with a number of historical pictures of the Iowa, both some sort of formal Iowa chiefs and plaques describing them, but also just a lot of Iowa tribal members' personal photos. And even, if I remember, I had a story over there in Life magazine about an Iowa who was a famous boxer in maybe 1940s or 50s or so. What can you tell us about this building, Pat?
Not much. It's one of the, when they started getting a little money to do something with from the casino, this is one of the first, after the tribal offices were built, that they built this for tribal meetings. Prior to that, we held them, Hiawatha and here on the res up in the old stone church, and needed a bigger place to hold the meetings, so this is one of the new ones that they built. They kind of did it up pretty well. These are mostly items, either family items or items that the tribal members have made, and they're loaning them to the tribe. I forget who all there is here. Well, there's cards there that say, this is Jim Rod's things here. I think it was a Potawatomi that beaded this for him for the ceremony when they installed him as chief back in the 1950s, I guess. He was something like 17 years old or in there. And that was the regalia he used. This is some more of it, if I remember right. These are Iowa designs on these. Beadwork.
The designs are very typical of woodlands material culture. Iowa existed sort of on the border between woodlands and plains, but a lot of the imagery we see, even if some of the material we use is more plains, a lot of the imagery is more woodlands.
More prairie than plains. Plains is still west of that. And I don't know who all these pieces belong to, but these are traditional stuff. And just talking about the beadwork, there are the designs, you can tell the Iowas because it is outlined in white beads, and the shape of the flowers that they did. This is probably come from George Ogden's family. All the different things that the veterans, where they were and what they did. And this is Jim Rod's, I believe. Oh, it's a combination of them and other people. The wing fan. These are dance sticks. And I'm sure this is one of the princesses. I'm not sure who she is. The bustle, that's probably Jim Rod's. And that's the map that Nohart drew of our land in Iowa. And
if you look at the map, was drawn during a treaty conference in Washington among multiple tribes as a way of trying to set out formally who resided where, who used what lands for hunting or for trade. So the big central line down the middle is the Mississippi River. And as the treaty commissioners were asking each tribe to describe their land so that they could take these down, an Iowa who was a part of the Iowa delegation named No Heart of Fear just took a piece of the parchment and a piece of the coal that they were using to draw, and he hand drew this map where you can see the Mississippi River down the left side. The big line down the left side is the Missouri River, and the smaller lines north or would be north of there, to the a little bit to the right going up, are the Iowa and the Cedar Rivers. Off here to the going right, going west mostly, is the Ohio River and the Wabash, and north of there the Wisconsin River. If you see the circles with nothing in them, those are lakes, and you can see the 4 lakes there is Madison, Wisconsin. So we're getting into Ho-Chunk territory there. And the large circle north of there is actually Green Bay. The circles with the dots in them were Iowa villages, and so the map indicates that there were Iowa settlements within the memory of the person drawing it, at least, or the oral history that he knew, on both sides of the river out there. And then the dotted lines are trails that were used to connect the villages, paths for trade, and for hunting, and whatnot.
And there is, let's see, Green, what was his name? The archaeologist. He was a state archaeologist for Iowa for quite a few years. He expanded this, used this map for guidance, and he drew it to scale where all this, they couldn't understand it. They thought that this was a bunch of hooey, but he has since expanded it and show where those all are in proportion to the river and everything else.
Now we are at the Partlow Cemetery, which is near the tribal offices. So tell me about this place, Grandpa.
Well, this is still contemporary. There are some old ones in there, but they're still interring people in this cemetery. This is James Rod, the last official chief of the Ioways. He died in 1997. But there are a lot of that people. They kind of tended to use their own family cemeteries for a long time. So you find old people in here as well as the recent ones. And this one's probably the best kept one because they are still using it. They were up here and did the GPR, the ground penetrating radar, to see if the fence enclosed all of the graves up here. And I think it does. I think they decided that there weren't more outside.
And is this tribal land, do you know, or is it an individual family's land?
No, this is all tribal land as far as I know.
Yeah, my name's Richard Maris, and this is my wife Linda, and we're members of the Nebraska Historical Society, and the old schoolhouse that was built in 1873.
An addition was put on, the back addition was put on in 1914.
I think when they built the building, I think what was it, $13,000 it cost to put this building up. It housed the whole school from first grade through high school.
The grade school, the elementary school was here on the bottom, and the high school was in the 3 rooms upstairs. There's about anything you want to look at in here. In the room over here on the north side, or I call it the north side, is a regular school room, and plenty of pictures clear back from the 1800s of classes that went through here. The people that put this together put it together back in what, 1970?
Yeah, early 70s.
And so there's just a lot of stuff in here. We have people that come in here and spend hours.
Yeah, we have some of the Iowa tribe back here in this one room. We got one area back there where we have some exhibits for the tribe out there. But
and this here is really interesting. I don't know why, but this is a thing of White Cloud newspapers, and it has in there Iowa tribal news. It has White Cloud news. It has the Negro section in White Cloud. It goes back to what was there, 1920s?
I don't know, but it needs to be gone through.
Yeah.
It's what needs to be. Somebody needs to sit down someday and just go through those and
what we have, what our problem is here too is that We have maybe 10 active members, and Dick and I are the youngest. Okay, down in where we go to church, there's a monument from Wilbur Chapman back in 1913, and it's where they say the penny bank originated. The town was on the
Travel
Channel. They came in and did a documentary on Wilbur Chapman, and we were on that. And it's a very interesting story. It's about a little boy and leprosy and saving money for the American Leprosy Association, and how he saved money and how everybody in the world did it, and it's pretty interesting. So we have a lot of history here in White Cloud, not just this building.
So here we are at the Iowa Point Overlook, which is not to be confused with the town of Iowa Point farther down the river, but this is the hill over the town of White Cloud and looks out over a lot of the valley here. You can see from this spot on a clear day, you can see into 4 states. You are in Kansas, you can look across the river to Missouri, across the river and far north into Iowa, the hills kind of at the end of what you can see there, and then more straight north up into Nebraska. And right now, as a result of the extensive flooding earlier this year, the river has obviously jumped its banks. This is a lot more water than you would normally see up here.
If you look real close, you can see there are fields out in here.
Yeah.
There's where they'd already planted. And they're gone.
Well, we're in the Immaculate Conception Cemetery in the town of Rouleau, Nebraska, north of the Iowa Reservation, where a number of the Murphys are at rest.
There's a list of the kids: Elaine, Patt, Ellsworth, Raymond, Mary Lee, and Donald of Grandma Murphy's. Lee and Elaine had to redo one of these headstones. Had the wrong date on it.
Mabel was a teacher and really loved her profession. And
she was almost 90. This is Uncle Clarence's wife, Nora. And then you've got Pauline Murphy. She's the last one that lived in the Murphy house on the reservation.
That was one of your aunts.
Yeah, she was a old maid aunt that took care of the Grandpa Murphy, Pete Murphy.
And took care of Ellsworth when he was little, right?
Yeah.
We're at the Rouleau Cemetery outside of Rouleau, Nebraska, north of the Iowa Reservation, and at the gravesite of Stephen Story. Can you tell us who Stephen Story was?
Stephen Story was my great-grandfather, and he had a ferry up across the Missouri River, up around the Half-Breed area, or Indian Caves up in that area. Stephen Story, there's a lot of tales about him, being a major in the military, whether it was National Guard or what, and he spent quite a bit of time in California. I don't know all the tales, but anyway, this is grave.
We are at the Iowa and Sac and Fox Mission outside of Highland, Kansas, south of the reservation where it exists now. So what was this place historically?
Well, it was a boarding school for the Iowa and Sac and Fox kids, and it was supposed to be a regular school. They had school here for a few years, not too long. They couldn't get the Indians to come to school, so it's part of probably both Sac and Fox and the Iowa land, and they had over 100 acres that the government took out of our land and gave it to the Presbyterian mission. And then it might have been an orphanage for a while, but it wasn't very long. They was closed for many years, and the Kansas Historical Society took it over in probably in the 60s or 70s, 1960 or 70. And finally they decided to make it a museum, and they built on an addition back here that doesn't come close to matching up the old building, but they put their elevator in there and a few other things. And then they opened it up as a museum. There were quite a few artifacts from local tribes around here and some from the Historical Society in Topeka, scattered over 2 floors, I think. Might have been all 3. And they couldn't keep a curator here, so it ended up closing up. And they were trying to get either the Sac and Fox or the Ioways to take it over. And then the last I heard from the Iowa tribe, they were considering taking it. Now, I don't know whether they did or not, but there's still signs up all over that it's a Native Heritage Museum, Native American Heritage Museum, but there's nothing here. And last I knew, they cleaned all of the artifacts that they had here out, and I don't know where they went. Whether some of them went back to Topeka, I know that, but who else got them, I don't know.
You mentioned that this started out as a boarding school and that they couldn't get enough kids to keep it going. But the Ioways did send children off to other boarding schools as well. Charles Kahega was one of the first students at Carlisle Indian Academy in Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania. And he was the second editor of the student newspaper there. The purpose of having a newspaper was less about journalism and more about teaching them the trade of printing. And Josie Vetter, who you mentioned earlier, also went to school at Carlisle.
Yeah. Kahega means chief.
It does?
And that's probably where the family name came down. He was somebody back there a ways, was a chief, or what they called chiefs.
That might have been why he was picked to be one of the first students at that school, too.
Could be.
Because he came from a prominent family.
Could be.
When Josie Vetter was in school there, she wrote a piece for their school paper about a trip they took from Carlisle to Harrisburg. They crossed the Susquehanna River, and she was 9 years old when she wrote this, and said she was amazed that from way above the river you could look down and you could see the stones in the bottom of the river. Rivers out here aren't that clear, are they?
They're not that clear and they're not that big anymore.
So it would have been a very different sort of look at a river that she had out there.
Well, all the rivers back there are humongous compared to these little creeks around here that they call rivers. When they didn't have a use for it anymore because the kids wouldn't come here and the different things like that, then Indian agent, I think he petitioned the BIA or something, Interior, to sell it. And maybe he didn't even have to because they had given it to the Presbyterian Church. He might have had to get permission from them. But they fixed it up so the newspapers that they published it in were the little bitty ones around here that hardly anybody read. And if they did, they couldn't afford to buy it anyway. And then they rigged it up with the preacher that was running this place at the time to go in and bid on it, and there weren't very many people there to bid. So he bought it for the Indian agent. The Indian agent couldn't buy it himself or wasn't supposed to because of conflict of interest. So the Indian agent had this and then he sold it because it's pretty valuable land. But he got it for a little bit of nothing. Nothing ever happens to them though. These allotments, every place they could, there was only one or two tribes, Navajo I think, and somebody else that wouldn't let them checkerboard the allotments. They'd put a white guy on one and an Indian next to him, and the white guys all around all these Indians, and it wasn't very long before they forced the Indians out and they ended up selling all their land.